Hello again, friends. And now we're going to talk about motivation a little bit more and its relationship to karma and power and responsibility that we have with the clarity of mind and the immensity of love to become co-creative with our material reality, otherwise known as Mother Earth. Our aspiration for the liberation of all beings from suffering requires that we liberate ourselves. And it's not just that we liberate ourselves from suffering, but we liberate ourselves from the causes of suffering, and thus we are liberating ourselves and ultimately all beings into that which is true from the dwelling place in relative reality in which appearances are very compelling and yet they are, the word is often used, illusory appearances. So we could say that they're illusion-like. That would be probably more accurate than to say that they are illusions. They mean including us, ourselves. We exist, unquestionably. Here we are, we exist, and so do these beautiful cliffs that I'm looking at out the back window here of this noble temple. So the appearances of phenomenal reality exist, and very convincingly so, but they don't exist in the way we think they do. That's the difference between illusion-like and illusory. It's a little bit of a distinction that's probably not necessary to make, but I think it helps to explain that illusion-like means, yes, existing, yes, beings exist in the relative, but in the ultimate, there are no sentient beings. Here, in the dimension that's ruled by karma, which means essentially ruled by ignorance, in effect. But the appearances that seem so compelling to us, we attribute to them the same selfness that we are grasping to in ourselves. I've heard it said and read it in teachings that it is somehow easier for us actually to contemplate, even intellectually, to contemplate the emptiness of self, the emptiness of ourselves. We're very familiar with the fact that our bodies change through time, that our experiences change our minds, and that the way we think about things isn't necessarily the same as, the way we thought about them 20 or 30 years ago. So we're familiar with the changing terrain within that gives us, and we are aware that we die, because we have seen beings all around us dying, and we know that we're going to die. And people may or may not live trying to back away from that information, but it's not far from our conscious awareness most of the time. And so we know that we're impermanent. We know that we're constantly changing. But when we look at certain features of the landscape, for example, again, these immense cliffs that I'm looking at here, it's very difficult to see them as empty. For some reason, objects outside us, it's more difficult, actually, to see their intrinsic emptiness. Interesting. I don't really understand it. I'm exploring it at the moment. When we recognize that we are intentionally generating the highest aspiration to free ourselves and all beings from suffering and into the true nature. That aspiration becomes gradually, and sometimes imperceptibly, but sometimes very suddenly, becomes the entire purpose that fuels our choices. And over time, I have felt that in myself becoming more prominent. I'm more aware of it as being the underlying purpose for my activities, even the mundane ones. An example, maybe you're familiar in your own life with being willing and actually able to do things for others that you're not willing or apparently able to do for yourself. I think parents do that all the time. They do for their children what they wouldn't be able necessarily to do for themselves. And people who perform great feats of heroism or strength or altruism in an emergency situation are able to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily have done. So we have that capacity, and as we bring that capacity into alignment with the highest, the bodhisattva altruistic motivation, we have access to and are also willingly used by energies that are very creative and very profound in their freeing us from apparent limitation and recognizing the intrinsic emptiness of self rather than thinking of it as intrinsically existent is also enormously freeing. Not only to the imagination, that we can understand and imagine realities that we can't create materially, but we can bend the arc in that direction. So the co-creative relationship with Mother Earth that I'm speaking of is one of the most extremely important changes that the human mind is being called upon to make. That instead of seeing humanity as the owners of the earth and all her resources, we think of ourselves as members with Earth of one ecosphere that we're all co-creating together and responsible for together. It's a very different mind. Very different mind. We can practice on that mind in little ways in our ordinary lives with others. We think of it in terms of the planetary consciousness and the planetary existence in the material world. It opens up avenues for communication with the elements, really entering into a sense of communion with the elements and seeing ourselves as cooperative with them rather than at their mercy and as the dominant force that might try to control them. The mind of control is the mind of separation, and that is a falsity. There is no separation. There are distinctions. There are things, and there's what we call discriminating wisdom, which sees things in their suchness, and they may see one taste, but also sees many flavors. And co-creativity and bioresonance are in the same family of concepts in a way. I spoke of bioresonance yesterday, that how the mind of human beings, actually our consciousness has a role in shaping the environment that we create and inhabit. Rinpoche speaks in terms of karma about how the inner universe of human beings is our individual karma that we create by our own thought stream. And the outer universe that we're inhabiting is co-created by many. So there's nothing, and this is responding to also to a question that was sent in wanting to know more about karma. So I hope that you're listening to this or will be able to see the recording if you're not able to be here this afternoon, the person who raised these questions about karma. So there's nothing that happens that isn't caused by something in the phenomenal reality. and every cause that brings forth consequence in the realm of human beings begins in the mind. So when we look at the question of motivation and karma and motivation and karma and material world, we're looking at a co-creative process that is more or less conscious. For most of us, the karmic causes we create, unless we are intentionally generating a certain kind of karmic cause, we tend to be unaware of them, which is how they can proliferate in ways that are so deleterious to the well-being of beings in the world. This is why I spoke yesterday about being able, through practice, to refine the inner seeing, the inner attention, the clear awareness, to the point that you can actually see thought as it begins to arise in the mind stream. And at that moment, with clear awareness, mingling with that thought, the thought is allowed to return to its true nature without causing karma. The other end of things is when we intentionally create good karma. We set seeds in the mind stream of excellent karma for ourselves. And we do that when we dedicate our practice and when we engage in activities to benefit others. The simple explanation given in the Dharma for how to understand good and bad is that good is what creates well-being and happiness, and non-virtue or ill virtue is what creates suffering and unhappiness. This is for beings. But we can look at it also in terms of, say, the earth. We would say that good karma is, in relation to Mother Earth, is what contributes to Mother Earth's benefit and well-being and health and balance. And bad karmic seeds are those that really undermine those conditions of health and well-being and stability and balance. So we know then, if we look at what's happening planetarily at this time, that there are great numbers of beings who have been, and including ourselves, who have been creating good karmic seeds, good karma for good relationship on earth, and great numbers who've been creating negative karma for the earth and earth beings. Both things have been happening. Right now it's very out of balance. So that's one very principled teaching about karma, relating to what is good and bad, what is virtuous and non-virtuous. Another teaching about karma that Rinpoche has given very succinctly in recent times that has been very significant for my understanding, and I think this is true for many, he has taught literally, you will never experience anything at any time or any circumstance in your life for which you have not created the cause. You will never, in this lifetime or any lifetime, experience anything for which you have not created the cause. Now, some of that creation might be co-creation with others in terms of manifesting external circumstances and conditions. A great deal of it is what's been created in the inner universe of your own and the inner universe of others. It's the same thing, the same process of creation of karma. The whole emotional display, the condition of our mind, the condition of our bodies. Rinpoche has also taught something that I think is very significant for us to remember. It takes some of the resistance out of looking at karma. Westerners, we're not very friendly to the idea of karma unless it's our supposed enemies that are getting their just due from their own karma. Then we feel pretty good about karma. But when it comes to us and negative things happening in our lives, we're very reluctant and loath to think that we have planted a seed from that. We have a phrase that we use. We say, oh, that's blaming the victim. But there is no victim. You will never experience anything for which you have not created a cause. And in extreme suffering, when the suffering is very great, it's very hard for us to remember that that suffering is the manifestation of karmic purification, that karma is coming to an end. It's completing. All karma exhausts on its own. We don't have to do anything to make it exhaust itself. It is a self-purifying mechanism in a way, you can say. And great suffering, it's hard to see that as the completion of something, but it is. And Rinpoche has taught something that's been very valuable to me. I've had a lot of illness and injury in my life. He's taught very clearly that whenever you have any experience of illness, especially he mentioned illness, whether physical or mental, he said, be very thankful when such manifestations occur for you and others, because this is the sign not just of individual karmic seeds coming to completion, but that your actual karmic predispositions are being purified, coming to exhaustion, which gives you greater freedom if you don't pick up the appearances of karmic purification that are suffering and embellish them and exacerbate them by laying down more of the same kind. There's a very detailed discussion on this in our book in relation to verse 8, which is about karma. And so if there are more questions about karma, consult that, and works of other teachers much more scholarly and knowledgeable than I, probably anybody would be, and more scholarly and knowledgeable than I about karma. Trungpa Rinpoche, Thrangu, Trungpa Rinpoche has written a work called How Karma Works, and that is well worth reading. So, but I want to relate karma and motivation here. When we're told in the prophecies that we're speaking of this weekend, when we're told that it's the mind of humans that needs to change in order for the earth to have a different destiny and different condition and destiny in the future, if we are not able to see the motivational seeds in our minds, how will we change them? The point at which we see their result, it's already happened. So our practice that we did this morning, drawing ourselves into the center and opening the inner gaze to be able to see what's occurring in the mind, to see the condition of mind, that is the inward attention that can discern seeds of motivation, which are seeds of cause. We can see what our motivational impulses are, our motivational energies, our motivational tendencies in a given moment. Increasingly, as we do that kind of clear awareness practice, this discernment becomes more available to us, and it becomes much less mysterious how things happen. We can see in a given moment, an instant, that we have a little, say, a jealousy reaction to something. And usually our tendency is to just not look at that with any great care and to move on by. And then we're astonished to find that certain results are arising that, we don't think we did that on purpose. We don't think we created this result ourselves. In fact, it's these other people who are acting in such and such a way towards us. Maybe we could go back and remember that there was a flashing signal in the mind stream, in a sense, a little jealousy thought arising. Because jealousy creates separation among beings. and often is accompanied by a denial that we're doing anything and an attribution of cause to the other. So it's a good example of the kind of information that is available to us with clear awareness and the inward attention that can be very informative about what the events are that are happening in our world. The causes of severe suffering for us are so far back, Rinpoche has taught, they're so far back in past lives that we will never know the exact moment of cause that brought something forward that is really of very extreme impact. So we don't need to pay a lot of attention to karma in that sense of trying to look into past lives, unless we have that ability. Some people perhaps do, but most of us do not. But we can tell a lot about what kinds of karmic predispositions we have, which means tendencies, habitual tendencies, by looking at the events in our present lives, and particularly in the present condition of mind and emotions that we experience. And I encourage you to do that kind of close personal study of karma. That's the principal way in which I study karma, in my personal experience, because it's always there. It's always informative. Whether I like it or not, and I frequently do not like it, but to study that in that close personal way gives you the power to choose moment to moment. When you're able to discern what's arising for you, you're also able to decide what you're going to do with it. And there's 3 simple rules. Don't grab it, don't push it away, and don't make up a story about it. Those are the 3 naturally arising antidotes to the 3 poisons of grasping, aversion, and ignorance. We owe it to ourselves and others to take that responsibility seriously and to learn how to use it wisely. It's very important. So you can see then the link between these matters of great suffering in the world and in beings, and aspiration and motivation and practice. There are many, many different kinds of practice. There are many different traditions that bring wisdom in practice. Even within the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition, there are innumerable kinds of practice, a great richness, a panoply of practices. The one that is the highest practice of all the practices that you could ever be given, the highest of them all is the one that works for you. To clear away your confusion, to awaken you from ignorance, to illumine your mind with truth that you recognize on the pulse, and with words that won't let you go, that say, this is for you, this teaching is for you, practice this. And that clears your mind, so that you are increasingly, as every day goes by, you are less a slave to self-grasping and more the master of your own mind and a master of love, and that you become contagious with love. Let's start a different kind of pandemic. We'll all be contagions of love. That's how you know when practice is working for you, whether your love and compassion are increasing and your afflictive emotions are subsiding, at least occasionally at first, and then gradually you notice a certain absence of affliction in the mind and emotions. And there's a great relief in that. And then practice gratitude and praise. Anything that relieves you of the burden of ignorance, praise, praise, praise. one other thought that I want to bring to your attention in relation to the question of what in the human mind needs to change is this, that the forces and tendencies towards separation, division, and hostility, and enmity, and war, these are very powerful forces in the mind that's caught in ignorance. They're so powerful that they seem overwhelming on the world stage, and in the individual life too, they can be experienced as overwhelming. But here's one of the words or little teaching capsules that I would like to have you store away in your mind for when it's needed for you. That these forces of separation and division and dominance over and control over and cruelty and enmity, they are not as strong as the forces and tendencies of mind that reflect union. Because those tendencies, mental tendencies towards division and separation, arise from and in ignorance. They are the thought forms of ignorance, and they give rise to mind of confusion, obscuration, and emotions that are very afflictive, of grasping and hatred, anger, hatred, and the basic ignorance from which they arise, the self-grasping, the grasping to self and all supposed attributes and privileges and needs and so on of self. That grasping becomes heavier and heavier in a mind that's disposed in those directions. So dualism, the dualistic mind, becomes harder and harder to awaken from. But nonetheless, the movement of mind towards union, towards communion, towards kinship, towards fellow feeling, towards good-heartedness, much, much stronger. Truth, there is nothing more powerful than truth. Nothing is more powerful than truth. So in the moments when things seem most intractable and unmovable and hard, lean back on that. Lean back on the truths that you have been shown. They all come from one truth. Lean back on that. Have confidence. So, I promised that we would do more practice this afternoon, and so let's go there. Now is when I wish we were in the same room together physically, and I could hear your voices speaking, because I would like to ask you what your experience of the practice was this morning. But then, of course, I was there too, and I know what my experience was, so I think it wasn't all bad. I think there was some good practice experience of recognizing clear awareness, fleetingly perhaps not stable in sitting in the condition that we might call clarity of awareness, but there were moments when clear awareness was present to be recognized. It's always present to be recognized. What's missing, and it never goes anywhere, clear awareness never goes anywhere, it's always here. The question is whether we're here or not in our recognizing capacity. So we're not practicing to create an empty mind. We're not trying to get rid of our thoughts. We're trying to see, recognize and strengthen our capacity to recognize what sees our thoughts, what sees what's arising in our mind. It's a very important distinction. People sometimes really say, oh, my mind was completely empty of any thought. Well, that's a nice result, perhaps, for a moment, perhaps, or an extended period of practice that recognizes. It's the recognizing capacity of mind that is the clear awareness, and that's ultimate wisdom. That's wisdom mind. Let's cultivate that. And it is necessary for us to have clear awareness in order to really do almost any other kind of practice. And I would like very much to introduce some of you who are new to it, perhaps, and then engage with you and with those who are more familiar, perhaps, with the practice called tonglen, which means giving and receiving. It's Tonglen. Some of you are very familiar with it. For others, perhaps it's a concept you've read about. And this is a good time for us to learn together how to be with tonglen practice. In verse 11 of the 37 Bodhisattva practices, which is really, if you had to choose from 37 perfect verses that each contain the entire Dharma, I mean, it's ridiculous to say, well, choose the one that's the essence, because each of them contains the essence. But if there is one verse that actually is the epitome or the quintessence of the Dharmic richness and depth and power of the 37 practices, I would say verse 11. And I'm going to read it out loud to you. All suffering, without exception, comes from seeking your own happiness. The perfect Buddhas are born from the altruistic mind. Therefore, truly exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Now, so far together this weekend, we've been talking about the first 3 points that are being made here. That all suffering without exception comes from seeking your own happiness is saying all suffering without exception arises from that innocent error that leads to self-grasping, the attribution of intrinsic existence to the momentarily existing self. And then the phrase, the perfect Buddhas, is used. And that's a teaching that we've touched in this weekend, that there is an ultimate reality beyond the ability of our senses and our intellect to imagine or to comprehend. It's beyond words. It's untellable. All we can do is recognize it when we see it and point to it for the benefit of others. And then it explains the perfect Buddhas, meaning that mind of ultimate wisdom and limitless love, is born from the altruistic mind, meaning the mind that is seeking the liberation of all. Not one's own only. One's own liberation will be an artifact of that desire, that irresistible call to liberate all. And so then the verse says, therefore, truly exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others. So that means if you have something, let's imagine it something material, if you have something just wonderful, the practice would be immediately to give it to another. But we're really not looking here so much at the material only, although that can be included. But what we're talking about here in exchanging our own happiness for the suffering of others is that upon experiencing well-being, we find ways to give that same to others. On experiencing suffering, we take on the suffering of others. On experiencing our own suffering, we take on the suffering of all beings. Upon experiencing being present with the suffering of others, we want to give them our lack of suffering, our happiness, our well-being. It reminds one perhaps of the teaching of Jesus, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. But it elaborates it in a very applied manner. So this is the way of a bodhisattva. This is the central practice of the bodhisattva, and it's called tonglen. And the way it's often taught, there are many, many ways to teach tonglen. Every teacher whom I know has just at their fingertips, in the moment, the way of practicing tonglen that seems most efficacious, most buoyant, most illuminated, most joyous, most natural, spontaneous. Or if someone says, how do you do tonglen? Innumerable ways of approaching tonglen can come forth spontaneously. And many teachers, myself included, do what I call tonglen on the fly, which means given whatever circumstance one finds oneself in, there's a way to perform tonglen in that circumstance. So there's no one form or one way to describe it. But what I would offer this afternoon, I want to offer two ways of doing tonglen. The first is just very simple, very direct. You're aware of some untoward circumstance, or you're aware of someone, a person or group. It doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily have to be a human. You're aware of some being having some negative circumstance or some form of suffering or difficulty. And out of compassion, fellow feeling, meaning you can see that suffering in that being, and a natural compassionate response, has you invite that suffering to come to you instead of remaining with that being. And you're not taking it in or on in a personal way. You're imagining yourself with sympathetic imagination. You're imagining yourself as in a deity form, if there's a deity that you practice, or simply as insubstantial, like a rainbow. You're appearing and vivid, but you don't have a solid form. You are simply an organization of light in a form that is recognizably a being, but you don't have a solid material existence, which is actually true. You really don't have a solid material existence. That's already a fact. We've established that. We have the illusion of it, but it's not actually true. And at the center of this rainbow-like being that you are, there is the most beauteous light, which is absolute bodhicitta. Love and compassion beyond any limit and with no fixation. It's like an eternal flame. It never is extinguished. It gives off great light, and it's always there, burning within your heart, your spiritual heart. And when you become aware of the suffering of this other being, and the intention arises in you to bring that suffering to yourself, you're bringing it not to your self, but to your absolute bodhicitta in your heart of this rainbow-like, insubstantial, beauteous being whom you are. And so at that moment then, the suffering of the other simply naturally comes to this flame, this fire, this light of bodhicitta in the spiritual heart, visualized perhaps as a smoky substance. Maybe if you wish to visualize it, you don't have to. You can just imagine, sense it as an energy of suffering coming. Or you can imagine it as a light of some sort, maybe a grayish kind of smoky light. And it comes directly upon the arising of the intention that suffering comes in that way, directly into this pure, unquenchable, indestructible light of bodhicitta in your spiritual heart. The instant that other being's suffering enters your heart in that way, where bodhicitta burns, it transforms instantly into bodhicitta. So the suffering of that being, which is caused by ignorance and harm-doing, becomes completely pure, brilliant, unquenchable, limitless bodhicitta itself, and flows back out to the being who was before that in a condition of suffering. And upon re-entering that being again becomes like you, rainbow-like, insubstantial, with perfect bodhicitta shining in its heart. So you have invited the suffering to come to you for its instantaneous, effortless transmutation. And then it returns, the light that it has transformed into returns to the being who was suffering, and that being is transformed in that moment to a being illuminated also by bodhicitta. A key here is the effortlessness of this. There's no one doing anything for anyone. You're not taking away a person's suffering and taking it on yourself and therefore catching whatever they've caught, whatever it may be. I mean, you could do this for COVID-19. It wouldn't hurt you in the least. And it's very helpful for that person, for that purpose, when you're dealing with something very dangerous disease that's highly contagious, for example. Maybe you don't want to start with that. If you have some reaction of fear or anxiety, don't start there. But eventually you'll find it joyous to be able to do that, because there's no doing involved and nothing substantive or substantial is being transferred from a sick person to you. There is no intrinsic selfness to the illness itself, and you are working in the light of bodhicitta. So all that's coming is the illusion of suffering into the truth of bodhicitta, which returns then, and the illusion of suffering has been replaced by the truth of love and bodhicitta. So let's do that together, effortlessly. We're not doing something, we're being. Yes? So let me just take a sip of water. You can perform tonglen in this way for an individual. Again, it doesn't have to be a human. You can perform it for a group of people, of beings. Can perform it, offer this kind of tonglen practice for a circumstance that is harmful or difficult, like if California is burning, for example. You could do it for California and the fires. Any form of suffering or harm or negativity can be transformed in this way. And there has been I've heard many discussions, some with lamas, some with other teachers, and some just among practitioners about, well, is this really doing anything? Is this really making any difference? I mean, is the person actually going to get well now? Or am I going to catch it? No, you're not going to catch it. So that's easily answered. Particularly, you're not going to catch it if you don't have an illusion going on that you have a material reality that's dealing with it, and that you yourself are, as a person, involved in doing this. That's not what's happening. Let's practice. Let's practice. I think experiencing is good. And then we'll do the second form of it that I want to give you that Rinpoche was taught when he was in the prison camp. Okay, so you sit in at that same relaxed posture that you sit in when you're doing clear awareness practice, and be aware, clearly aware, as you do this non-doing practice of tonglen. And by the way, this is also given in our book. So it's and there are many other teachers, of course, who give beautiful, profound examples of how they do tonglen. So you can find it many sources on the internet and in bookstores. But it's the same posture, and clear awareness is how you're going to discern, how you're going to be able to see in the mind that process of transformation as it occurs. And in the sensorium that you have as a living being, sentient being, you will have certain experiences that may accompany this transmutational process. And it's clear awareness that will make you aware of them. So every practice, as I said before, is a practice of clear awareness. So here we are, sitting totally relaxed, just at ease, and happy. Let's really be aware that we're happy that we can be available in this way for suffering beings and suffering situations and suffering planets. So allow to come into your awareness the being with whom I like to use the expression, with whom you wish to practice tonglen, and let that being or situation or circumstance be placed directly in front of you. So you see it very clearly, very vividly, very present. It's very precise and specific. It's not some vague thing, oh, may all suffering come to me and be transformed. It's specific. You can choose something where there's someone dearly known to you and close, or somebody whom you've read about, or maybe not a person at all, but a circumstance. Okay, so let that the ones or the one with whom you're practicing the offering of tonglen be placed directly in front. And see clearly, as you are seated in your body of light, rainbow-like and insubstantial and self-illumined from within, and at the heart, the spiritual heart center, the fire of bodhicitta, absolute bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta, love and compassion and emptiness, blazing softly and powerfully, radiant within you. And directly in front of you, seated opposite you or positioned with clarity directly in front, is the circumstance or the situation or the being of beings whom you're aware of with compassion and care and concern. You recognize suffering or malaise or illness or danger or some kind of karmic pattern that is ready to be released, perhaps. And now with just a natural breath in, that, I'm just going to call it suffering, that suffering moves on your in-breath, comes in to the bodhicitta heart. Entering your bodhicitta heart, that suffering in whatever form it came to you is instantly and with no effort on your behalf, instantly transforms into bodhicitta, like fire merging with fire, light merging with light. And now on an out-breath, a simple, natural, unforced out-breath, you breathe out that light of bodhicitta, and it returns to the being or the beings or the circumstance sitting in front of you. And that being now becomes, like you, a being of light, insubstantial, rainbow-like, vivid, and yet without solidity. And that light of absolute bodhicitta is shining, radiant and warm in that being's heart. Or if it's a circumstance or an event or a place, in that place, the heart of that place or that circumstance. And then you just continue sitting and breathing. And if you want to offer it again, you can do it again. You can repeat it. So bring that one to conclusion. And now we'll do another round with a slightly different angle. In this round, identify a condition of suffering that you yourself are experiencing, or that you have in your repertoire of experiences that are present with you from time to time. A condition of your own suffering. And now call to sit before you, to practice tonglen with you, other beings. You may know specific beings who have this same kind of suffering. It might be a form of ignorance or confusion, or a pattern of behavior that's hurtful, that you engage in and that you know others who engage in. It could be something of that nature, or it could be some painful emotion that you have that you know others who have. You don't have to know the beings whom you invite to come and sit in front of you, and they could be a number of them. There doesn't have to be just one. So what you're then doing is you're going to be, again, effortlessly. There's not actually a real doing happening here, but there's there's something occurring, but it's not involving action. So what you are then, you're sitting in, again, in your rainbow-like body, your body of light, and color. It's vivid, specific, recognizably you, but it's not substantial. And again, this exquisite, profound, and powerful bodhicitta light is shining in your spiritual heart. And at the same time, in your mind's continuum, you recognize with clear awareness both the shining bodhicitta and the suffering of you as the being you are, and the beings in front of you, placed in front of you, who have the same form of suffering in their continuum. You recognize them also insubstantial and illuminated by the potential bodhicitta, potential, and also with the same form of suffering that you have. And now, again, the same way of proceeding. You bring their suffering, which is just like your suffering, you bring it into you, into your bodhicitta heart, recognizably the same suffering that you have. Recognizably. You draw it willingly and lovingly and bravely into the absolute bodhicitta, radiant within you, in your insubstantial form. And instantly, effortlessly, no action required, it transforms into bodhicitta, taking away the suffering from the others, bringing it all to you, transforming into bodhicitta, and flowing out on the out-breath to the beings who formerly shared your suffering, who are now free of it. And you are also. Both they and you are free now of that suffering which has transformed into bodhicitta, limitless love and compassion. There is a very precious secret that is to be revealed to you through your practice of tonglen. I encourage you to practice in this way if this method of doing it is appealing for you and meaningful to you. You'll only find that out perhaps by doing it a bit. And please go ahead and research other methods of practicing tonglen. As I said, the ways are innumerable. For example, going to the market. If you're at the moment going to the market these days, don't spend a lot of time, and please wear your mask. You could go to the market, and if you consume meat or fish, when you come to the body parts section of the market, just as you stand there or walk past even, you can very swiftly draw the suffering of those beings into your body of light and return on the out-breath to them complete freedom of suffering, complete freedom from suffering. That's what I call tonglen on the fly. You just, at walking along in your normal activities, you come upon a moment of suffering. Somebody is hurt, something's going on that's difficult and painful for people. And just like that, on an in-breath, without any investment of personality and a recognition of the insubstantiality and openness of all experience and all appearance, just like that, you draw in on the in-breath into the bodhicitta heart, and then on the out-breath, return freedom from suffering through bodhicitta. Just like that, in and out. Not effortful. There is no I doing this practice. The I is sitting there. It's the bodhicitta that's doing the work. If it can be called that. I'm not sure that that's exactly accurate. Bodhicitta does its work just by being. We'll be like that too, to do our work just by being. Now I want to share with you another form of tonglen, another way of thinking about tonglen, and another way of understanding the practice of tonglen that Rinpoche has brought us from his prison time, where he was given this teaching on tonglen by his root guru, Khenpo Munsel, whom I mentioned this morning. And it's really the heart essence of tonglen. And I'm so happy that I was made aware of this practice by Christina Lundberg, who's the director of the Garchen Institute presently. She's a very accomplished, award-winning documentarian, filmmaker, and she has made a magnificent film of the life of Garchen Rinpoche called For the Benefit of All Beings. It's available. It's available on DVD and probably in other formats as well. And in that film, breathtaking film, in the materials ancillary to it, perhaps, I'm not sure I remember it being in the film, but in the ancillary materials, I came upon this practice, or this tonglen teaching, and I've included it in our book as an appendix, and I would like to read it to you and then just speak to it a little bit, and then we can sit with it. It was given in Kathmandu in 2007. And this is composed by Rinpoche, what I want to read to you. The main practice I did in prison was tonglen, giving and taking. Khenpo Munsel gave me many special oral instructions on tonglen that were not in the text. In tonglen, we generally say that we're sending happiness out to others and taking others' suffering in. But for the actual meaning of tonglen, you have to understand the inseparability of self and other. The ground of our minds is the same. We understand this from the view. In this context, even if there are many different types of suffering, there is really only one thing called suffering. There is only one suffering, he taught. If there is only one suffering, then at this time when you yourself have great suffering, you should think, the minds of the sentient beings of the three realms and my mind have the same ground. However, the essence of the suffering of the sentient beings of the three realms and your own suffering is the same. If you see them as the same, if you see them as being non-dual, and then meditate on that suffering in the mind's natural state, that suffering goes away. At that moment, you've been able to lessen the suffering of all sentient beings of the three realms all at once. The len of tonglen means taking. First, take in this way. Tong means giving. If you understand mind's nature, then you recognize the essence of whatever suffering and afflictive emotions there may be to be emptiness. When suffering does not harm you anymore, the mind has great bliss. If at that time you meditate making self and others inseparable, then that bliss can diminish the self-grasping of all sentient beings. It can lessen the self-grasping. The happiness that is being given is the bliss that comes from the practice of giving and taking. This is how you should practice. This is very special. Others do not explain it this way. Put in the language that we've been using this weekend, when he says that the mind of self and others is the same, has the same ground, we could say clear awareness, the true nature of mind and all of reality, is the single ground for my mind and yours, for my mind and the mind of suffering beings in every situation, for my mind and the mind of beings who are in the bliss of non-suffering. Clear awareness, wisdom nature, absolute bodhicitta, all words pointing to the same reality, the true nature of all things, all appearances, and the true nature of the absolute, the ultimate that is beyond words. Clear awareness is what we've been speaking of it as. And then when he sees when he says, in this context, after saying the ground of our minds is the same, he says, in this context, the ground of our minds being the same, all having the same clear awareness nature, ultimate nature, even if there are many different types of suffering, there's really only one thing called suffering. There's only one suffering. Khenpo Munsal taught to Garchen Rinpoche, there's only one suffering. And that's because of the unity of mind, the non-dual union of mind, basically, all minds having the same ground. And that ground is clear awareness. That ground is the wisdom nature. So then we could say, but the wisdom nature has no suffering. That's true. But the one who recognizes the wisdom nature in one moment is the same one who doesn't recognize it in the next. And in that moment, there is suffering. We're not stable yet in our recognition of the true nature of clear awareness. We're practicing on that, but we're not stable yet. So moment to moment, we can have clear awareness or we can have suffering. And in practice, what we're working with is to have those two moments join, to have the suffering arise in the mind that is recognizing clear awareness, and then the suffering transforms spontaneously into its own nature, which is clear awareness. And if the mind is not stably in the practitioner's mind is not stably in the state of clear awareness, as the suffering will definitely arise. And then you can practice on that moment of suffering to call forth the clear awareness. And then they are mingled. And in the mingling, the suffering subsides and dissolves. And that suffering is the same suffering that others are experiencing. If they were not in the moment of clear awareness themselves, they're in the moment of suffering, and that suffering has the same nature as the suffering that you are experiencing. That nature is intrinsic awareness, clear awareness, but it's being experienced as suffering because the clear awareness is not recognizing itself. Mind of suffering does not recognize mind of clear awareness. It can be trained. That's why we practice. So then he's saying, given that there's only one suffering then, when you yourself have great suffering, you should think, minds of sentient beings and my mind have the same ground, clear awareness. And the essence of the suffering that we experience is the same. And if we see them that way, as non-dual, and we meditate on that suffering that we're all experiencing as the same suffering, in the state that is the natural state, meaning a state of clear awareness, then that suffering goes away. And Rinpoche is saying very definitely, I mentioned the question that people have, speaking about Dharma, is the suffering really affected by our practicing tonglen? Are we really making a difference here, or is it just making a difference in our own mind? Both and. It's certainly making a difference in our own mind, as you will understand very quickly when you take up the practice of tonglen. But it's also making a difference in the suffering of beings. If suffering, our minds are one, if suffering is released, is liberated in one mind, the sum total of suffering of minds of all beings is lessened. Isn't this marvelous? When suffering does not harm you anymore, the mind has great bliss, he says. And if in that great bliss state you meditate, making self and others inseparable, meaning seeing the inseparability of yourself and others, then that bliss that you're experiencing diminishes the self-grasping of all beings. That is marvelous. Our Lama is speaking directly to us and saying, yes, you have the power by intention, clarity, compassion and love, and practice to lessen the suffering of all sentient beings. Please do so. Don't hesitate. Be bold. Be brave, generous, and undefended in practicing tonglen to lessen the suffering of all sentient beings and one's own. When you have, my experience with Garchen Rinpoche about tonglen is very, very definite. Whenever I have been in his presence, or, as we know, communicating not in the physical presence, and I encourage you to do so, and I can share with you how to do that if you don't naturally know. Whenever I've been in his presence, or have made available to him consciously the information that I am totally messed up and confused and making a mess of things, or even if I haven't made it known intentionally to him, but somehow it's conveyed, who knows how, by the great suffering in my mind somehow conveys itself to him as information. Barbara needs help. Please do something. The message is always practice tonglen. It's just over and over. Practice tonglen. Take the moment of your greatest suffering and confusion and sit down and take that confusion from others and let it transform in the fire of bodhicitta that is your altruistic intention. So let's sit for a moment then in that knowing of self and other as non-dual, and allow the suffering of countless beings, of all beings in our world system, and our suffering, which may be our suffering about their suffering, in fact. But allow our suffering and their suffering to be recognized as one suffering, all suffering having the nature of suffering, and all wisdom having the nature of clear awareness. Let's sit in that light and lessen the suffering of all beings. Okay? Shake yourself up a little bit so your body is very relaxed. Stretch a little bit and turn your head on your neck very gently so that you open up the muscles there of the shoulders and neck. Okay. I'll gong once in and twice out. Now I would like to speak for a moment about a particularly powerful way to work as practice with Life's Song of Holy Praise. I've touched on two aspects so far. One is the constant, naturally arising spontaneous expression of love and gratitude and devotion in the voicing of praises. And the second is the transformation by praise of the very painful and strong and at the moment quite pervasive emotional conditions of doubt and fear and grief and anger. To change in the mind of humans is the mind of dominance arising from the illusion of separation. Fear and anger and dominance are old friends. The recognition of the transiency, the evanescent quality, the fleeting lifespan of all that we can recognize as phenomenal reality. Anything that is created is going to, at some point, cease to exist. It's easy to think that of ourselves, we know that. It's not very easy to think about that in relation to the planet that we call Earth. All world systems come to an end, and new world systems constantly arise. In the long view, we can see that with equanimity. In the short-range view, that is heartbreaking for beings to consider. And even those who are not thinking that way are aware of the great challenges of planetary change and the great challenges to human beings and other kinds of living beings of living in a planet that is in the throes of such profound changes, in which the elements of fire are burning. The air becomes unfit. Waters inundate and drown, carry away earth from some places and drown earth in other places, and beings are displaced. And the very dimension of space becomes I actually don't know what to say about space. In one of the systems that I have been trained in earlier years, space and sacred sound were considered together. So sometimes in my mind I go to sacred sound instead of thinking in terms of space. And then I think of the winds. I think of the singing of the winds in the trees. I think of the natural sounds of land rising and falling, and waves moving, and storms coming and going, and the sweet sounds of the birds and the amusing sounds of some of the other animals and the sounds of human beings. If we understand sacred sound as one of the faculties, the elemental faculties of human beings and other beings who can voice, then we understand something about praise, that it gives form to sacred sound, form that is life-loving, gratitude expressing, and love articulating. A third way in which I recognize as practice the vision that I received about life's song of holy praise for this lovely planet Earth is in dissolution. The dissolution of appearance in clear awareness. The dissolution of form in space. The dissolution of suffering in recognition. The dissolution of separation in equanimity and knowing the sameness of phenomena. And in the practice on clear awareness, and using clear awareness as the vehicle of practice for many different kinds and expressions of spiritual practice, but the actual practice of recognizing our turbulent emotions, our emotional afflictions, recognizing our thoughts and images and truths to which we grasp, that we ascribe truthness to and grasp hold of, and self-grasping itself, recognizing all of these forms of ignorance, confusion, and suffering as they dissolve in the mind in specific moments and instances that we are aware of as we sit with the inward attention, paying attention to mind's movements, to the condition of the mind. And what sees that is the mind that is beyond condition, the mind that is ever at rest in stillness that cannot be named, and the state of absolute pristine perfection that is here with us and of us, in us, is who we are from the beginningless. What sees that perfection and what sees the apparent imperfection of suffering is wisdom itself. Inseparable, in non-dual union with limitless love. And in that mind that is momentarily or stably residing in, abiding in clear awareness, all appearances that arise in conditioned mind come to rest in the empty, open, spacious nature of wisdom itself. including all conceptions of physical form, of materiality, of phenomenal appearance and experience and existence. And so in our practice, our Mahamudra practice, or our awareness practice, our nature of mind practice, our clear awareness practice, our Dzogchen practice, whatever form of awareness practice we're doing, and let's call them all clear awareness practice for the moment. In this kind of practice, we are taking the moment of dissolution as the moment in which we recognize mind's true nature. And in this way of practicing, if we are in some way going to become aware of the dissolution of the physical form that we call Mother Earth, that's our practice. We're practicing clear awareness practice in preparation for our own death, which is dissolution for us, and the mind in that instant of physical dissolution, the mind has a moment of clear awareness, which, if recognized, is indeed the moment of liberation. So clear awareness practice is also a window for us through which to see the possible dissolution of the earth form. Certainly, aspects of the earth form are dissolving in our vision at the moment. People in California, I have heard, lamenting the end of the beautiful, powerful, inspiring cathedral-like forests that they have loved so much throughout their lifetime and their parents' lifetimes and their grandparents' lifetimes. And many of those forests will not regenerate as forest. And of course, some of them are the great trees that have never been cut. And now they may be burnt beyond what can regenerate in some places. So endings are with us. Endings of the physical form of Earth as we have known her, those endings are present now. There are little tiny island atolls and island principalities and nations that are having to move their people on land, onto mainland. There are species needing to migrate, including the human species, but species also of animals and reptiles and insects and birds are needing to move because the climate has changed so much that they're no longer suitable for that climate. They have to find another. So this ultimate dissolution of the form of Earth may or may not occur in our recognition. We may not recognize this, but we can recognize a process already underway. It is our responsibility, and it's within our power to hold this process in a state of mind of equanimity and love and radical acceptance. Radical presence in the process, radical acceptance of the process, at the same time seeking to bring balance back where there is imbalance, to bring cooperation back, or to bring it where it never has been, where it is not yet, to bring the co-creative process of ourselves and other beings on Mother Earth, on planet Earth, and with planet herself, to bring that co-creative process that can bring forth good seed and good places to plant it. Seed of mind, seeds of cooperation, and comity, love, and participation with each other. These are very simple virtues. Very simple. Let us practice them. As the situations become more and more apparently complex and indomitable, let us inhabit them with radical acceptance, saying yes to the actuality and yes to the possibilities of the actuality opening, being an opening and opening doors in our understanding and our willingness to step forth together and in our own minds to take the responsibility of changing what is showing that it needs to be changed. You can see that. You're a practitioner with clear awareness. You can see what's in your mind. If there's something you need to change, change it. Please, now. It may take time, but work at it. Accept the responsibility and work at it. And ask for help when you need it. There's abundant help. There's help in blessings, there's help in teachings, there's help in practice, there's help in friends and companions on the path. Be fearless. When we know our true nature, we know there is nothing to fear. And still, here we are in our bodies. Here we are with our conditioned minds, and there seems to be plenty of fear around. To the extent and in the circumstances in which we can, let's practice fearlessness based on the great courage that comes from great compassion and love. That's its source. I am very grateful to be able to sit with you in this way for these 2 days. And now we have dedication prayers to do. Rinpoche has made a special request that we do a certain prayer, which we'll do, a certain prayer practice. I do want to ask you, those of you who feel inclined to do so, to take Life's Song of Holy Praise for the lovely planet Earth as a practice, to use it in whatever way you can, to make your own mind pliable and resilient and generous and brave and undefended. We certainly are, because there is nothing to fear, so we have no need to defend. Thank you. Let's make our closing prayers. Before we get to the ones that are in the formal practice, I want to read to you and show you, there is a little book called The 7 Verses of Supplication to Tara for Protection. I think it's available in the bookstore. I'm not certain. Apparently it's a different color in the bookstore, green instead of this violet color. It's by the head of our lineage, the man who has started the lineage of the Drikung Kagyu, Lord Jigten Sumgan is his name. And in the back of this little booklet it says, when Lord Jigten Gunpo beheld a vision of the 7 noble Taras in the Echung cave, he supplicated them with this prayer, which is known as the 7 Verses of Supplication to Tara for Protection. It is renowned for its extremely great blessing. And Rinpoche asked those of us who are meditating to do this prayer every day. He explains that Tara, often referred to as Mother or Buddha Tara, or exalted Goddess Tara, is of the essence of the wisdom that we have been speaking of this day and yesterday. Clear awareness without beginning or end, inseparable from love. Exalted Goddess, Mother Tara, you dwell within the Mother, the unborn sphere of phenomena, giver of ease to all sentient beings, please protect me from every peril. Mother Goddess, please protect sentient ones who wander in cyclic existence. My mothers whose minds have fallen under the sway of afflictions and do not recognize that they themselves are Dharmakaya. Authentic Mother Goddess, please protect those in whose minds Dharma has not sincerely arisen. Those who, following after mere expressions, have been deceived by base doctrines. Mindful Mother Goddess, please protect those distracted by evil activities, those who, having seen the natural mind so difficult to comprehend, do not habituate it. Goddess of non-dual mind, please protect those who, no matter what they do, are bound by the mental imprints of dualistic grasping at the mind that is self-arisen non-dual wisdom. Omniscient Mother Goddess, please protect those ignorant of the meaning of knowable things, those who, though having dwelt in the true meaning, are not aware of the dependent relations of cause and effect. Perfect Mother Buddha, please protect those beings, disciples, who still do not see that all things endowed with the attribute of unelaborated space are inseparable therefrom. And then at the end, there is a homage by Lord Atisha and a supplication to Tara, which reads, Om, homage to she who protects from the 8 perils, homage to she who blazes with auspicious splendor, homage to she who blocks the door to evil destinies, homage to she who guides on the path to the higher realms. You have continually accompanied me. Pray protect me evermore with compassion. I pray this before I sit down to do my practice. And we want to pray the 4 lines of Shantideva. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed. And Rinpoche has requested now that all his disciples, as often as possible, on a regular basis, perform the prayer for world peace and welfare. And if you have the blue book of the Drikung Kagyu prayers, it's on page 38 and 39. And after the prayer, it says, this prayer was composed by Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche for the peace and welfare of Tibet in order to suit present times. Lama Tubten Nima, one of the lamas associated with the Garchen Institute, changed certain wording, such as the reference to the whole world instead of only to Tibet. The prayer for world peace and welfare. The 3 jewels and 3 roots, trustworthy source of refuge, and in particular the Lord of Snow, Avalokiteshvara, Jetsuntara, and Guru Padmasambhava, I supplicate you, please follow your previous pledges. Bestow blessings that this aspiration prayer may be fulfilled most perfectly. Due to the degeneration of times, when thoughts and deeds of beings are perverted and the inner and outer elements have lost their balance, men and cattle are seized by epidemic disease previously unheard of. Intruding Rahu's Naga's powerful demons and dark forces, blight, frost, and hail, bad harvest, warfare, and so forth, erratic rainfall, heat, misery, and droughts in the world, destruction by the elements such as earthquakes and the threat of fire, and in particular barbaric offenses causing harm to the teachings are rampant. May all types of harm and injury around the world be swiftly pacified and overcome. May precious and supreme bodhicitta spontaneously arise in the mind streams of all beings, human and non-human, and may they be free from destructive thoughts and deeds. May all be endowed with a loving mind for one another, and may well-being, glory, and prosperity prevail throughout the world. May the Buddha's teachings spread far and wide and ever last. By the truthful power of the three roots, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, by any root of virtue existing in samsara and nirvana, and by the power of our perfectly pure highest intention, may the fruition of our supplication and aspiration be attained. And now the dedication prayers to close our retreat. By this merit may I attain omniscience. Having defeated the enemies, my wrongdoings, may I liberate all beings who are tossed in the ocean of samsara by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Whatever virtue sentient beings possess, whatever good they have done, will do, and are doing now, whatever goodness there may be, may it permeate all beings everywhere. By the virtue accumulated throughout the 3 times by others and myself, may all beings filling the reaches of space enter the gateway of the unexcelled path, and may they attain the Vajra holder's ground. By all the virtue actually performed and mentally created by myself and all sentient beings of the 3 times, may all beings of the 6 realms attain the 5 kayas and realize the primordial wisdom of the Buddhas in the Dharmadhatu mandala of the awakened mind. Glorious root Guru, precious one who sits upon a lotus at my heart, hold me with kindness and grant me all accomplishments of enlightened body, speech, and mind. I pray for the excellent health of the Guru. I pray that he lives a supremely long life. I pray that his activities spread far and wide. Grant blessings that I may not be separate from my Guru. May the Buddha's teachings, the only source of benefit and happiness, endure long, and may the victory banner of longevity for those upholding the teachings be steadfast. May the sound of the great Dharma drum liberate all sentient beings from suffering. Please remain and teach the Dharma for infinite millions of kalpas. By the might of this powerful merit, may the aspirations of the benefactors and their circles be accomplished within this very life. May their obstacles be pacified, may everything be auspicious, and may their wishes be fulfilled according to the Dharma. Just as the hero Manjushri realized things as they are, and as did Samantabhadra too, I will follow in their path and perfectly dedicate all these virtues. As all such dedications have been praised as supreme by the victorious ones of the 3 times, I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue to excellent conduct. By the blessing of the Buddhas who attained the 3 kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging nature of reality, and by the blessing of the undivided Sangha community, may my prayers be fulfilled according to this dedication. By the virtues accumulated in the 3 times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the intrinsic root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious awakening. Great Vajradhara, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Pamodrupa, and Lord Rikungpa, may the auspiciousness of all the Kagyu Lamas prevail. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage gurus, divine assembly of yidams, assemblies of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, heroes and heroines, Yogini and her assembly of Dakinis, all of you dwelling in the 10 directions, please heed me. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May thoughts of fame, reputation, respect, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life, At the moment of death, may I not experience the suffering of being abruptly severed from this life. May I not suffer a terrible death. May I not die confused by wrong views. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of mind itself and in the crystal clarity of the Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. For this realm encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. Tenzin Gyatso, Lord Chenrezig, may you remain steadfast until the end of samsara. Embodiment of the three jewels, great being who upholds and increases the teachings of the Shakya lion, supreme are your activities of guiding others with your perfect deeds. May you, the precious Guru who accomplishes everything spontaneously, live long. Holder of the teachings of Lord Drikungpa, great Lord of the three jewels, through the power of your peerless compassion and the holy Dharma's peace and light, you bring relief to beings. May your life be long. The one known in the whole noble land as Aryadeva emanated into the Gar clan of eastern Tibet as Chudingpa, the heart son of Jigten Gompo. May the life of glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. And this is the long life for His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche that was composed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Crown of the Shakyas, kind friend to strangers, the 17 great Panditas, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, Jigten Somgan, and their lineage heirs, please bestow good fortune and auspiciousness. Protector Amitayas, transcendent Lord who grants supreme life, everlasting, stable and unchanging, and who diverts from untimely death anyone who merely hears your name or thinks of you, please bestow good fortune and auspiciousness. Living austerely in the higher training of discipline, full of compassion, that is the glory of those to be tamed, devoid of all grasping, never parting from Mahamudra's natural state, Nyanunten Penyima, son of the teachings, may your life remain firm. May the teachings of the great Jikungpa Bhattacharya, Master of Interdependence, omniscient Lord of Dharma, who has seen all knowable things, be upheld until the end of cyclic existence through study, practice, hearing, contemplation, and meditation. Your 1,000 eyes are the 1,000 wheel-turning kings. Your 1,000 eyes are your 1,000 arms are the 1,000 wheel-turning kings. Your 1,000 eyes are the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. Your love is boundless like space. I supplicate to the Bodhisattva, Chenrezig, Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. By this virtue may I swiftly accomplish, Lord Chenrezig, and may I bring all beings without exception to that state. May Bodhicitta, the precious and supreme mind, arise in whom it has not yet arisen. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but ever increase, higher and higher. Emaho. In the center is the wondrous Buddha of boundless light. To his right is Chenrezig, the Lord of great compassion, and to his left is Vajrapani, the Bodhisattva of great might. They are surrounded by an inconceivable assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Immeasurable peace and happiness is the pure land of great bliss. When I and all beings pass from this life, may we be born in that land, unhindered by another samsaric birth, and may we then behold the face of Amitabha, boundless light. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions bless this aspiration, that it may be accomplished without hindrance. Tejata Pansadriya Awa Bodha Naya Soha. Hello. Please. Come.
I am making this offering of thanks to you, deep gratitude on behalf of the Garchen Institute and on behalf of all of the students that sent offerings for you for this weekend of really such deep, nourishing Dharma and wisdom and so much love. So thank you so much for bringing all of your beauty and sharing it with all of us because we all benefit so much from your life of practice and your assimilation of Dharma in your life. And we all benefit greatly from all the jewels that you've shared. So thank you so much. And unfortunately, we don't do traditional kata offerings in the time of the pandemic. So
thank you very much. Thank you. The opportunity to be here, particularly in these circumstances, when I go into quarantine for 2 weeks in order to be squeaky clean so I can come. And then here we gather with just a few people, your dedicated servants of the Dharma and dedicated devotees of our Lama and dedicated servants of all beings. It is so nourishing to me since I'm living in isolation. It's so nourishing. I mean, of course, it would be nourishing even if I were living in a circus, but, and I guess we are living in a circus, but I feel deeply fed and deeply loved and deeply, deeply grateful for the opportunity to bring Dharma in whatever form I can. You know, I'm not a scholar and I'm not an accomplished practitioner. I'm just a little yogini who sits over there and, kind of following Milarepa. I like to think that I was Bardar Boom because it sounds so much like my name, Bardar Barbara, right? So here I am with our present day Milarepa, and my gratitude is exceeded only by my joy and love. So,
well, I would not agree with that description. I do believe that you're definitely an accomplished practitioner, and we are most fortunate and blessed to have you share all that you have learned and incorporated into your way of being. And so thank you so much. And just to remind everyone, the brave, generous, and undefended, really, everyone, I highly, highly recommend this book. It's like the Bible, like the equivalent. Everybody should have a Bible. Who's a Christian? Well, I highly recommend. So please.
I think this is the Bible.
Yes, but this helps you understand it. And practice it. And Lopon Barbara has kindly signed so many of these books.
I want to sign some more before I leave
She'll
tomorrow.
sign more before she leaves. But please join us in December, because Lopon Barbara will be leading a retreat December 19th and 20th here. So please join us again for that, most definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dagmar. Thank you, Billy. And thank you, Padma. Okay. Retreat complete.